Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Barbara Tien with Project Kin, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to today's installment of Kathy's Corner. You probably are here out of Kathy Stone's incredible reputation as a remarkable archivist and photo manager, always the one we go to with respect to the materials that we've inherited, the heirlooms, so precious in our families, wanting to make sure that we're not the ones that let something happen to them. And today we have a very special guest in Jane Chapman. I'm going to defer to Kathy and let her give Jane a proper introduction. So I'll back out of the way. Go ahead, please, Kathy.
Thanks, Barbara. So I'm going to just a little bit on where we're at right now with Kathy's Corner and what's coming up. So far this year, we talked in January, we talked about quests. Barbara and I are on quests now, not setting goals and things like that anymore. Talked about that. And then in February, we had Postcards Part 2, following up on our postcard series that we did back in December, where we had guests, some of whom are here today, who came and spoke about the postcards in their collection. And we realized, wow, this is a huge topic, postcards. So in February in part 2, we talked a bit more about preserving those, curating our collection and preserving them. And Barbara and I have had some chats over the time that a big part of what we're doing, particularly in Kathy's Corner, we started off as talking about digitize. I know I was looking at an old post-it, it's got digitize that collection on it. And so it doesn't really cover what we're doing now, but I think our word of the year, Barbara, is going to be curate, because that's in effect what we're doing, is curating all these things we've accumulated in order that they become something that is meaningful for those coming after us. And I think that fits great link between the postcards and today's session, where we're going to talk about heirlooms. I practiced pronouncing it since Sunday. Heirlooms, family treasures, and all the stuff, and how to deal with all that stuff. And I think as I work towards, as part of, we started Kathy's Corner of me telling the story of me working on my family photos now. And now that I've pretty much through all the photos and slides and things, image related digitizing, and I'm now into the stuff, the memorabilia, the objects. So this is really timely for me. And I think we'll end up talking about it a few more times this year as we go along, because it's another piece that's different than dealing with photos and other things, as these objects and what we do with them. And so what we're going to start with is Jane. Jane has a collection called the Treasure Box that was inherited, and she can correct me if I'm wrong at any point. It belonged to her husband's mother. He inherited it, and Jane has been working with that collection and publishing articles about what's in that treasure box on her Substack, which I know Barbara is going to put in the resources. And Jane is a genealogist, not a writer. I'm going from her Substack introduction. I think actually, Jane, you are in fact a writer too. Maybe not as a by profession, but definitely Jane writes good stories too. And she's studying her family history and telling the stories since the 1990s, and also involved in looking into DNA and researching all those family stories. So thanks for joining us, Jane. And I'll turn it over to you to tell us all about the treasure box.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've put together a few slides, because when you're talking about things like postcards, it's good to be able to see them. So I think Barbara's got that under control somewhere. As Kathy pointed out, what I referred to as our treasure box is actually my husband's treasure box, really, but what's his is mine. The contents in it have been passed down from my husband's great-grandmother, Emma Veal, to her daughter, Winnie Darcy, and Winnie in turn passed it to her daughter, Shirley. So you can see them there in a row. And then Shirley, my mother-in-law, passed it to my husband. And so it's come down 3 generations, and four if you count my husband. Emma married twice. So you can see there, she married William Darcy and second Arthur Tregarthen Mumford. So both Emma and Arthur feature in the box. Winnie married William Harold Coop, known as Bill, and both Winnie and Harold feature in the box. And then Shirley married Joe Chapman, and both Shirley and Joe have stuff in the box. And I've since added some stuff of my husband's and also a little booklet recording a trip that we took to the UK that I had written quite detailed notes. And so I've started to add the next generation of stuff. I don't know where the box itself came from or which generation gathered all the things together, or and put them in there. But I think it was either Emma's box or Winnie's box. It wasn't Shirley's box, so it must have been either Winnie who pulled the things together and put them in there, or Emma herself, the oldest one of the three women generations with three women. And you can see the three of them there in a photo, Emma, Winnie and Shirley, which was taken, I think, in Wellington in about 1945, 6-ish, in their backyard. I think some people, I'm sure, will be looking at the picture on the left of the screen and thinking the postcards need to be taken out of the box and preserved properly. It doesn't seem quite right somehow to separate the contents from the box. The box and its contents, have been passed down all those generations, with each generation adding to it, and it just seems that that's part of its magic somehow. So I'm really reluctant to take things out. So all I've been doing is putting things in. And then I can pass that on to whichever of my children I can convince needs it. What I've done, though, is begin to preserve its contents digitally. So I still have a lot to go. But as I scan a postcard or a photograph or an item in the box, it ends up backed up on my computer. And in addition, I'm progressively researching the items themselves and then writing that up. I've started with the postcards sent home to New Zealand during World War I. Most of them are written to Winnie, but some are written to Emma, some to Arthur, and some were sent as postcards and some were sent within letters and don't actually say very much at all. So if you want to go on to the next slide, my focus has been on what I know from evidence about the send of the card, the person it is sent to, and the relationship between them, as well as what can be inferred from the card itself. So this card, you can see that dapper young man there, is James Patrick Lowry in his Wellington Mountain Rifles uniform, complete with spurs. The card was sent to Emma. It's addressed to Mrs. Mumford. That's, her second married name. Dear Mrs. Mumford, from James with my best wishes. So it doesn't say an awful lot, but it's nice to have a picture of him there. Emma was known in the family as Da, and you can see that there's writing at the bottom. That's Shirley's writing. She's written, Mrs. Mumford was Da, your great-grandmother. James is a mystery, but an impressive photo. So she didn't know who James was either. Fortunately, one of the cards had J. Lowry at the top, First Field Company, and from that, I was able to find his military file. We're very, very lucky here to have all the World War I military files digitised in the National Archives. And I've relied on them a lot with this research through all these postcards. And also the Auckland War Memorial Museum, which has a cenotaph with a lot of information too. And I was able to go on there and find a picture of James on there so I could see it was the same person. I think, so once I spotted that, once I spotted his name on there, I got his military file, and then I was able to go from there. He isn't a relative, but he seems to be a friend of the family and obviously very fond of Winnie from his cards, I think. So the next slide is another one from James. This is another example sent from James, probably in 1915. It was during 1915 that the Australian-New Zealand Army Corps, the Anzacs, saw action in the Dardanelles as part of the Gallipoli campaign. So he must have, it was after that. So I think this card must have been about 1915. It reads, Dear Winnie, hope this little card will bring your wishes true and give you the best of health. I'm writing to all in New Zealand this mail, something new for me, you will say. Never mind, Winnie, I'm just the same old kid. Good luck to you, my love, my best love and kisses. May your happiness never fail you, your old pal James. And you can see lots and lots of kisses there, so I think he was very fond of her. James survived the war and he married a French woman who he brought back to New Zealand. And he served for 4 years, 231 days, 1914 to 1918, and he served in Egypt, in the Balkans, and in Western Europe. So he certainly got around during the war. Right, the next one, Barbara, is from Jack, who is also a mystery. I put it on there, you can't see it very well, it's very blurred, but I put it because at least it's got a picture of him, even though you can't see it very well. He sent a lot of postcards to Winnie. I picked this one because he has his photo on. It appears that Jack served with one of the New Zealand mounted rifle regiments, just looking at the photo. Mountain riflemen were essentially infantrymen on horseback. They were expected to ride to the scene of the battle, and then, unlike traditional cavalry, they dismounted and went into action as normal infantrymen. The reverse is also faded. It reads, I have come to greet you, to Winnie from Jack, taken near Babylon, Mesopotamia. So that's modern-day Iraq, I think. It's undated, unstamped, and would have been sent in an envelope. It's probably sent during 1914-ish, because the mountain rifles would have been in Gallipoli in 1915. So, right, there's another one in the next slide from Jack as well. Now, on this one, you can see he signs from your brother Jack, which is intriguing. The other cards Jack sent during World War I were from Italy, France, England, and Scotland. This one is from London. Some of these cards, as I said, are signed your brother Jack. Some are signed your loving brother Jack. One, not shown here, says to my dear sister Winnie. But it's all a mystery because as far as I can determine, Winnie didn't have a brother called Jack. I've looked everywhere for him and I can't find him. I'm sure she didn't have a brother called Jack, but that's what he says, so I don't know. On the front of this card's London Bridge. It was sent to Winnie from London on 16 November. It doesn't include a year, but based on other sources of information, I think it was probably sent in 1918. It reads, Dear Winnie, what do you think of London Bridge? It looks much nicer on paper than it really is. How are you keeping yourself? I've not had a line from New Zealand for a long time. Ta-ta just now, from your loving brother Jack. So there are lots and lots of cards in here from Jack, from her loving brother Jack. The next one, number 6, yeah. This one is it's from Frank Dornan, and there are 3 in the box from Frank. This is 2 of them. They both had the same picture on the front. All of them were sent home to New Zealand from England during or not long after the end of World War I. One is to Winnie and one is to her mother, Emma. And we have another one, which is on the next slide we'll get to in a minute, which is went to Winnie's stepfather. Frank was Winnie's first cousin. His mother, Ellen Darcy, was Winnie's father, William Darcy's brother. They were brother and sister. There are 2 postcards from Frank, as I said, and you can see them there. The one to Emma says, to Aunt Emma with love from Frank, London, 24 April 1919. My mother-in-law Shirley added, for the benefit of my husband, Uncle Frank Dornan, ex-Lower Hutt, remember. My husband remembers visiting Frank when my husband was young as a child. And on Winnie's card, Frank wrote to Win with kindest regards from Frank, London 24/4/19. The addition of Dawn in there again was my mother-in-law trying to inform my husband who it was. It's the next one, Barbara, is from Frank to Arthur Mumford, who was Emma's second husband. And it has a picture of troop ship Plimpton on the front and was sent to Arthur. I'm not sure when. It doesn't have a date on. And even though it's got an address on, it doesn't have a postmark. So it was probably sent in an envelope, so I don't know when it was sent. It says this is the ship Charles was lost on, not clear enough to make anything out. Thick fog at the time. I'll try and get another view and send out. Hope you are all well. Love to all from Frank. I'm losing my voice. As yet, I haven't found out anything about the ship or where it sank, and neither do I know who Charles is. I haven't found that out yet either. It was clearly someone who was important to Arthur, but I don't know who he was. During the war, Frank was a first-class signaller and served on the Western Front in Europe, including at the Somme, because that's where the New Zealand division was when he went into the field. While I was looking at military records, I was also reading some of the background material about where New Zealand troops were so that I could put things together. And I knew that he went into the field when he went into the field, and I knew that the New Zealand division was at the Battle of Somme. So I assumed that he was at the Battle of Somme, which he most very probably was. He survived the war. His World War service consisted of 2 years and 72 days. So, okay, next slide. This is from Bill Coop, that's Winnie's husband, my husband's grandfather. This is from a Christmas card. It's an extract from a Christmas card. It didn't have Bill's photo on, but I just added his photo there so you can see what he looked like. He looked so young, actually. He was 22 when he enlisted, but he looks younger to me there, but anyway. He enlisted 10 months after they got married. In December 1915, they got married in, I'm just trying to think, I've got my dates wrong here. He enlisted in October 1916 and he had got married the year before in December, so they'd been married 10 months. And with the Christmas card, it's actually a card, and it's got the writing and it's got several pictures in it. And this shows an image that, along with the other images, was part of that card. Sent in October 1917, about a year after he enlisted, because he would have done training here first and then gone over there. It shows the campsite of the New Zealand Rifle Brigade at Penning's Camp in Wiltshire in England. And Bill has put, if you notice, he's marked the location of his tent with a cross, which is quite nice. I like that. And just a simple message with love and kisses, Bill. And that would have come in an envelope as well. So, okay, next one is my favourite. And this also is from Bill to Winnie. And it's embroidered in France. I saved this to the end because it really is my favourite. It was Winnie's name embroidered on the card. It isn't clear when and from where Bill sent this. It's likely to have been sent during the first half of 1918 while Bill was in France and on active service in Europe. The card was made in France. You can see down the middle of it, it says Fabrication Français. Bill has written, "My dear sweetheart, another PC I bought tonight with your name on it. I'm writing a letter besides this, so will not say too much. with big love and kisses from just the same as ever, Bill. As you can see there, the message was followed with numerous hugs and kisses. During his time overseas, Bill was hospitalized 4 times, twice after being wounded in action, one due to influenza and one due to anemia. He did survive the war, and his World War I service amounted to 1 year and 153 days. So that is about it for that. Of course, there's a lot more in my post, but that gives you a quick sample of some of the cards. And of course, there's more in the treasure box that I haven't been able to investigate properly as yet. So anyway, that's my samples.
I must unmute. Wonderful. That was great. I love those. I put a couple notes there. There's a couple. The first one is such a good example and a well-preserved example of the real photo postcard. The one the one that's not a relative in the military uniform.
Yeah.
Then the
Yeah.
embroidered one. I can see why you saved that to last, because that is
Yeah.
a great find in those embroidered cards. And interesting that it came from France. That would be, might have to do a little more research into the embroidered ones, because I think my cousin that joined us on December 4th had a couple with embroidery on them and we're still she's trying to figure out, because these came from, she was adopted, and these came down through her adoptive father. And so she's got a little trouble tracking much further past grandparents things. So trying to figure out who these might have belonged to. And of course, doing it once everybody's gone is always a challenge as well. But I love those examples. And I think it's great, Jane, that you're adding your husband's stuff to the same box. And that's something I was going to mention later on, is how do we store these treasures, which I'll get to. We'll talk a bit more about that. But I see nothing wrong with keeping that. To me, the box is part of the whole story. The box.
Yeah, well, that's how I felt. I felt taking them out would just, it's
No.
part of the magic, really, that it's been
And that's
down.
where, as a professional photo manager would say, no, we must carefully preserve. But as a person with treasures, I would say, yeah, I keep them in the treasure box. Makes sense.
I have it here so you can see it.
Yes.
So you can see how
Wow.
big it is. Yeah, I don't know if you can, how well you can see it. It's blurred, isn't it? Whoops.
There we go.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can see how
It's
big it is.
big.
Yes. And it's wood.
Yeah,
wood?
wood.
It's beautiful.
Quite heavy.
Does anybody have any questions for Jane? I've had a couple, but I've lost them already. So
You don't know how old the box is?
No, I don't. And
No.
as I said before, I'm not sure if it was Emma's or Winnie's, but I don't know anything about the box really. There are keys to it. The keys are inside it, along with a whole lot of other interesting items.
Wow, I'd be tempted, if you haven't already to do a Google search on the box itself.
Yeah,
because
I could
sometimes
try
that will turn up very similar boxes and start to narrow at least where it's from. The parquet, inlay and so on is done in a lot of places, but the lock may be the specific giveaway to at least know whether it's contemporaneous to the same period. Boy,
Yeah,
I'm inspired now. I have a box of cards that my mom received over the years, and I just couldn't throw it away. But I don't know who these people are. But turning it into a treasure box, and it's like a puzzle.
It's
Wow.
mainly postcards and photos, but it's also got things like and they're across various years, not just World War One. Lots of different photos of them, but it's also got in it commemorative coins and cups. And I pulled a few out. There's this cup which needs cleaning.
Oh,
Wow.
But this was one in a sailing tournament by my father-in-law.
Oh,
And you
wow.
might be interested in this. This is a commemorative coin for the New Zealand bilateral relations in 2012. It was the 70th anniversary, and it was it was recognizing that the 37th Infantry Division arrived in Auckland 12 June 1942, and the Marine Division arrived in Wellington in 14 June 1942. So that was during the war when we had a lot of Americans here. And it's got the flags on one side, 70th anniversary, 1942 to 2012. And then on the other side, it's got the bald eagle and a kiwi, which you won't be able to see.
Yeah.
And it says, if I can read it, I've taken my glasses off to read it. If you ever need a friend, you have one. And it's got the bald eagle and the kiwi here, and then
I could
soldiers
be
at the top
wrong,
here.
but I believe those are called challenge coins
Are they?
that are passed out in the military. You might want to Google that are
Yeah,
passed around in the military with that thing of if you ever need a friend, that if someone had given you that challenge coin and you ever needed somebody and you met someone of the same from that same area, you
right.
could ask them for help. I
Okay.
think.
Yeah.
And
I
Barbara's
forgot it
nodding,
was
so I'm
there.
guessing I maybe not just
It's not just
Yeah.
the military, it's the military and other, I mean, I know the State Department does that sort of thing as well. So it's
I forgot it was
commemorative.
there till I went rummaging around this
Yeah.
morning just to see what else was
Yeah.
there because I'd forgotten.
You know, I think a lot about shifts in media. And you know how today we do something as if we are the end of the train. You know, we are the terminus of the train, and here is everything. Okay, I'm done. I'm done with that package. I'm going to go on to something else. Actually, no, right? We are
Yeah.
custodians at this
Yeah.
moment. You were talking about curating. And it
Yeah.
occurs to me that, hello, digital world. I mean, what we're doing here is recording you talking about in your own voice what you have in this collection. As I do with all Project Kin, and started with Jennifer's, thank you, Jennifer's Speakers Corner series. I'll send you a link to this video so that you can add the video itself to your digital archive with the rest of the material. Because it's important that you were telling that story.
Well, and what a way for when we have all these stories to tell, what a way to get them told and recorded, and and then keeping them without having to go back to them. Like when I did my Speaker's Corner on my grandmother, now that story is told and by at least by a granddaughter, with that pieces added to it, and it's fascinating too. And I forgot I'd had this, and hopefully I'm not so. And I'm trying to find out, my Canadian buddies can help me here. It's Moyer's Pot of Gold chocolates, and it's very old. I can't remember when we had Pot of Gold chocolates, and if it was Canadian company or an American company. But this is my stepfather's. We found this in my stepfather's apartment. This little box. It's small. It's an old box because it's got quarter-pound measurement on it, and we haven't had pounds measurement for a long time. But in it it's his watch he got from 25 years of service with Eaton's. So again, Eaton's was a very large department store in Canada, and is sadly gone like every other department store in Canada. But they had the catalog just like Sears. They got the Eaton's Christmas catalog, and he was a delivery driver for Eaton's, was what his job was. And the back says, if I can read it, Jane, I don't know.
Yeah, I had to take my glasses off too. I always think
Alan Martin Pratt, quarter century service with the T. Eaton Company. And it said 1948 to 1973, and has his employee number on it. And then there's a couple, and again, where you have to explore these things. This is very interesting because you're wondering, why is there not real gold, or I'd be retired by now for sure. But it's obviously a little pocket knife on the end with a big gold thing. So in Edmonton, where I grew up, the fair here in Calgary, it's the Calgary Stampede, which is worldwide known. Back in the day, it was called Klondike Days because Edmonton was part of the route to the Klondike. And the fair, you dressed up. in that period's clothes. So the men would wear the shirts, the embroidered vests, and they would have the pocket watch and the chain on it. And I know I have pictures of us dressed up from there, so I've got to reunite this little treasure with it. And there's a couple other things. There's his old badge. There's another knife in there that's got, or a bottle opener with the Devon Hotel and Coffee Shop on it, which I think is a little town in Alberta. And then I was just looking at this today. He was a hunter, and so this is a bird band. And so I'm just thinking this was like a Canadian bird band. I read it today, and it says, Fish and Wildlife, advise Fish and Wildlife Service, Washington, D.C., USA. So he must have shot a bird that had flown into here from the US. So it's that notion of treasure boxes, but I think what you're doing, Jane, where you're researching everything in it is just so, yeah, Marcy said the Moore factory in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Moore was a Canadian company. And then Pot of Gold the name, I think, is still on somebody's chocolates these days. But it's I think what you're doing, Jane, is really valuable. And then when we're talking about creating treasure boxes, in identifying what those things are and adding the stories to them so that
Yeah.
it stops being just a box of postcards with names on it. And I was looking at some of the others. Barbara's going to share the link to the Substack posts you've written about them. And I was reading some of the other ones, and there's one that's the postcard that's all text with a poem written on it. And I thought, that is just
Yeah.
incredible. But you've got the stories and the connection. And while I'm listening to you talk about all of your family in World War, or your husband's rather, in World War One, I had an uncle at Gallipoli as well. He didn't fare so good. He was actually killed at Gallipoli. But talking about the mounted regiment that then switched to, they robbed their horses, then they became essentially infantrymen. My grandfather was in the British Naval Cavalry, which makes absolutely no sense how you have a naval cavalry, but they were very similar. They went over on their horses and rode up to a certain point and then got out and were fighting in the trenches. So it was, when you hear all these stories, it's those connections and the maybe being at same places. But I think what strikes me is that the work you're doing to identify the history behind the objects is so important, because and I think that's what we mean by curating the collection. You're curating that box, which then to me is fine. You're digitizing it, so you've preserved them, and then you're keeping it all in the box, which I think is terrific, because why on earth would you throw out a box that could be that many generations old? Like, it just or just take a picture of it and say, I found all these all these postcards with just pictures on them. I think there's a certain value to the tactile thing.
Yeah.
There's something very special about the word curation. Frankly, we spent a lot of time thinking about this in building a software startup. Never mind that for the moment. But, when you run a museum, you have the collection of the museum and you pull up a bunch of the artifacts for a single exhibit. When you do that, you are curating from the collection to tell a story in objects, to tell a narrative from those objects. And I think in putting together this box, you're obviously selecting the box thoughtfully, and then you are curating the objects that go in that box. It may be, this is all I have, and it all goes into one box, which is itself a story. But I think in most cases, as in this century, as we have inherited stuff, sometimes it's pick out the best stuff. Sometimes it's pick out the stuff that mom loved. Sometimes it's pick out from what remains that, didn't want some other thing, and tell its story. But I think the important thing is, in fact, to curate, to take the time in selecting the objects and putting them together. It could be not just a dining, a set of dishes, but it could be a set of dishes with the tin of biscuits, or, the combinations of things that they loved, because it talks about who that person was.
Yeah, my biggest problem, I think, is that there's so much in this box. I was never going to get through it all.
Yes.
But I figure all I can do is just start somewhere and see how far I can get.
Exactly. And if you start with the one where or where your mother-in-law or someone else wrote on the cards, I'm like, yay, that's like a treasure to find. It's like, oh, thank you for telling me who these people were. If you start with the ones that you know are related, and then you start digging into the stuff that you're like, I have no idea, like, who are these people in that research? Then you've made great, and it helps. Like, just in the ones you showed us, Jane, you've told a story of World War One as well. Like, between the one that was training in England, that was in Wiltshire, England, in a camp at some point, obviously waiting to go somewhere at that point, and the image of the pith helmet and the cavalry with the spurs on and everything. That it's all part of that. And the one who sent the postcard from Mesopotamia, now Iraq, and Egypt, and all the other places. It just shows, because for me, when I first, when I was younger, and we study history in school, but I always envisioned World War One as being much like World War Two, like it took place mostly in Europe. And in fact, and then when I started doing research, I was like, oh, wow, was I wrong about that? It didn't really. It took place it truly all over the world. And so it's teaching at the same time as storytelling and teaching from something that's interesting to look at, not just reading lines out of a book.
And actually doing it, going through the process of doing it, you're learning all the time as well.
Yes.
So,
I have a practical question for you. As you go through this, and maybe this is just a little obsessive of me, do you create an index so that you've seen a log, so that you've seen the object before? I would think of that way, so I know, wait a minute, what happened to 22? It's missing. I just had it. It's that other postcard from Winnie, but where is it?
Yeah. No, I haven't done that, but they are all organized in digital files in some semblance of order, the ones that I've digitized so far. But I haven't actually logged them.
That's a great answer, actually. I mean, that effectively is saying that, recognizing that when you take a photo of an object, and you have, as they say in the business inventory business, it is a significant number, right? You can have garbage numbers that were just the last picture taken, or you can have a name string or a significant number from that. And it becomes your own catalog of what these objects are, depending on where. And then you are obviously repurposing those images. And today, and obviously even more so in the future, any image that you find, you can go find its twin pretty easily. Computer vision is just that easy. So it effectively
I've
is.
got two files. I've got one file with the ones I've digitized and written about, and then I've got another file with some I've digitized but haven't yet written about and researched. So and then I've got a whole lot in here that I haven't yet digitized at all. So
well, it sounds like you're doing exactly that. You are moving it through a workflow quite manually. I mean, tactily. It's nice.
Well, and I had a few questions to ask oneself. These aren't specific, Jane. I'm not expecting you to answer these questions. These are questions for people to think about. But if we're creating our own treasure boxes, and one of the things that got me thinking about this, and I think I'll finally be able to talk about it, is I lost a dear friend in December. Suddenly, someone I had lost contact with. It was a very good friend of mine when our kids were young, and our boys are still friends, and in their 30s. And I'd lost contact with her. She lived in the neighborhood where the kids went to school. And so I assisted them with their memorial slideshow. But she was the keeper of the things. She was the scrapbooker. She was the one. So, It's the shortest memorial show I have ever done because it was barely it was just about 6, 7 minutes. And usually I'm having the short version and the long version because I have so many photos to put in them, and I'm really hard. And most of mine have been done for family, and so it's very hard to say, oh no, I'm not putting that good picture of them in there. But it triggered a whole lot of things. One, make contact the people that where you keep thinking, gee, I should see how so and so is doing. Do it. That's my first piece of advice, totally unrelated to photos, but it did hit me hard. And I found out she was going through a lot of health issues as well. And so that explains why neither of us connected with each other. But it was just sort of like, wow, we could have connected. But at her service, she was a crafter. She did, you name it, she painted little things. She painted little tiny squares of things. She did knitting and crocheting, and they had a whole bunch of, and they were all quite small things that she had made at the service. And it was very informal. It was in a community center. So they were just like sitting up on a cabinet. And I'm thinking now, what's going to happen to those now? Like they obviously grabbed a few things from the house to take there, but what'll happen to those things? And it got me thinking about the whole idea of our own treasure boxes, because I also have photos from when my cousin passed away. Um, and again, the trend here seems to be cremation. So there isn't a casket at the surface. So then you want something there besides like an urn. And so they had all sorts of things that represented his life. And I'm thinking those should all be in a treasure box. Those are treasure box items of Rich, because his Oilers hockey jersey, he was a huge hockey fan. He went to all the games. So his jersey was, and his ball cap with all the players' signatures on it. It had his pool cue. He was, and his trophies he'd won playing pool because he was a big pool player, and poker chips, and just everything you looked at, you just went, yeah, that was Rich. And I'm thinking, those are the things, because one of my first questions is, what items do you want your descendants to have when you're building your own treasure box? And I'm like, those things that you would put on the, that you would set out at the service. That would be a good place to start. Like, what thing of, speaking of your own, and again, we're dealing with, and I think that Barbara's kind of what we're going to move into this year is with coming up with Lori Olson with the time capsule and things, is that we are also need to tell our, and this came up, and it was Lori, I'm pretty sure, who mentioned this in one of the many, many chats around Roots Tech, that something that it struck her is we need to be also writing and telling our own stories now too. And we're all overwhelmed. That's me. I'm not, everybody's overwhelmed, but we're still all dealing with all the stuff from our previous people. But are we telling our own stories? So I had sort of three questions, and this goes back to the thing we've always talked about in organizing is, what do people need to see? What do they need to have, and what do they need to know about? And this fits clearly into what would I like people to have? What things do we want to keep that would go in our treasure box? And so my question basically was, what items do you want them to have? What items should go into that treasure box? And then how would you tell the stories about the items that are in the treasure box? Because wouldn't it be, you had a little bit of help. I like, all I know is what I can figure out some of the things from my stepfather's treasure box, but there's a lot there and there's not much in there. It's tiny because the watch happens to be engraved, and I know, but also I'm pretty sure he didn't retire that early. I'm thinking he worked quite a bit longer, so he had more years. But what are the stories? Like, the story behind his career. The bird tag leads into all the stories about him hunting and fishing. That was his big thing, and it makes that connection. But how will you connect the stories with what's in the box? And then I thought, Barbara and I were chatting about this the other day, because I was mentioning, and I think I forgot to send you the link, Barbara. I'll try and find the link to my ship in the bottle story that I did with Marty. Is the things that we have now, that I have things that belong to my grandparents, my grandfather, that need to be passed on, and that I discovered when I was working on the ship in the bottle story for Marty McNabb at Show and Tales. My kid didn't even know what that was, because a lot of my treasures right now aren't in boxes yet. They're out on bookcases and shelves. I have a special shelf that has a whole bunch of treasures in there. And how will I tell people what they are, who should get them, or if nobody wants them, where should they go? And that would be the other points. And I'll make up another, because I can do that, a spreadsheet. But I thought that would be the good place to, once I'm going to store mine. I know a couple of you, we are XYZ, or Z as we'd say in Canada. We are XYZ, but I don't know how Simon pronounces it from England.
Zed. Zed.
But
Zed, Zed,
Zed, we are
Look,
XYZ.
it's
Yeah.
only me here, okay? I get
Okay,
it.
good.
You don't need
And
to.
so
I understand.
that would be a place where I know you can put, and I use a different company for mine, but I can put the photo of the object and the story in there, and then I can link it back to either by numbering and putting a little label on the bottom of the item to connect them together. And I can add in that documentation who should get it, because I was joking with Barbara that I don't know, or somewhere we got on the topic of Yorkshire pudding, which was I think on a live or something, and it's in the family. The Yorkshire pudding pan it's a big deal. Like the one that was Grandma's, I didn't get, but somebody bought me one. So, oh, Barbara found my ship in the bottle story. Good. So and I said, well, somebody bought me a cast iron Yorkshire pudding pan in the 80s when I lived in Quebec at a flea market. And now, but my son has mentioned, who's the one who does all the cooking at Christmas and whenever we're making Yorkshire pudding, he goes, I want this. Like when you're gone, I want you write that down somewhere that I get the Yorkshire pudding pan. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. And also to write down the military, like we've got military stuff from my grandfather, like the ship in the bottle. It was built by prisoners of war in World War II who were interred here in Kananaskis country, just west of where I live. And who knew until I was old enough to understand that Grandpa served there as part of the Veterans Guard, that we even had a prisoner of war camp here in Canada. Who knew? And so there's other items from there. There's several items, and it's like if no one has, because the pressure put on our descendants these days who have small places they're living to keep all this stuff. Like I'm still in our house that we raised our boys in. I've got stuff everywhere, but they don't have that luxury, and they won't. Is where should it go? Where should these heirlooms go if they should be preserved? And the military museum would be somewhere that would take those particular items from that. And I think that's what's important to think about when we're looking at all whether we call them heirlooms or our treasures or just the stuff we have. Yeah, Marcy, I get it. Yes.
Masking tape.
Yeah. And Barbara
Masking tape.
mentioned, and there's some companies who will do this storage where you can put a QR code on the bottom. I'm back into the old label thing. Like the QR code sounds like too much work for me, but just by labeling on the bottom who gets what. And then that makes that part easier, but also you've thought about it and made conscious decisions and made it known that if nobody wants this particular thing, you don't want them to send it to the thrift shop. Like send it somewhere else, get it taken away. Barbara has some china that she doesn't just want sold in the thrift store and stuff. So find out which is the stuff too that you go, yeah, I don't care about that. You can get rid of it. Like personally, somewhere in a box I have a pet rock. For any of those who were of a certain age in the 70s, I think the pet rock craze was. And so I'm like, you guys need to keep the pet rock, because if you want, like, it certainly is of no value because it is literally a rock in a cardboard box and there's air holes in the box. Yeah? And it says pet rock and it has a little straw bed in it. But if you want that as an illustration of cultural things back then, doesn't that fit? The pet rock is ideal. So I gave Barbara a list of resources, and they're all drawn again from my friends at Archival Methods, who I have no affiliation with. They just write really good blogs on this topic. And so I sent Barbara, there's about 5 links to different articles about storing small items, storing your heirlooms. I sent you one on textiles. There's one called How to Store Your U.S. Flags, but I figure it would apply to almost any flag because a flag's a flag. And they were specifically talking about the veterans' flags people get when someone passes away in the military, but I'm pretty sure we do that everywhere else too. But anything and textiles, because that's a big question that comes up too, is, I've got grandma's quilts, I've got this, I've got I've got in my clients, I've got their I lost the word for it. They were given honorary degrees in the gowns, not convection, that's what
Hoods.
hoods.
I
Those
get
are
convection from there.
convocation. I tell you, the brain is just not works every day. But they have those still, and they probably wish to keep them. So how do you store them becomes the next question, because right now they're hanging in dry cleaning plastic, which probably not doing them a whole lot of good, and also kind of inconvenient for storage. So how do you put things like that? We have in there from the 1930s, it would be my client's mother was on the the pep team at her high school in the US, and they've got they had a little hat with the school name on it, and this sweater that when we first found it we thought, did this belong to a child? But she was apparently quite a tiny lady, and so there's this her sweater with the school name on it too. Well, that's from the 30s. It's, we're talking almost 100 years old now, which I don't know how that happened. But so how do you preserve that, and how do you keep it, and and make sure that when somebody comes along who doesn't know what it is, doesn't go, let's just take that down to the donation bin and get rid of it, and that it's representative, because I'm kind of thinking the school might even take them back, because if the school still exists, they might take them back. So that, I think, are the questions, and I think it's illustrated perfectly by what was in the treasure box that Jane got, that there's more in there than there's multitude of things. And I know I've been building them for my boys, and what's in them so far are the hospital bracelets, the cards that were on their incubators in the hospital. One son was jaundiced, and so I guess apparently now they have fancy goggles. Back in the day, they cut them just out of like out of gauze. So he had this little pair of sunglasses made out of gauze, so they're in there, and things like that are in there. And a friend of mine who lived in northern Saskatchewan and taught on a reservation, bought them handmade moccasins, and so their little baby moccasins are in there. So things like that I'm putting into their box. And then the weird part comes is that at some point, scrapbookers, we decided you should save baby teeth. So I have all their teeth in there too. So I might get rid of those. I might say, do you dudes want to keep your teeth? But if I ever need DNA, I have their teeth. So it's and there's one where one of them lost a tooth at school, and so it got lost in the middle of the field, and we did the whole tooth fairy thing. So this was not a good thing, and it's very bad when you have twins, because there is somewhat of competition. And so if one guy was going to lose out on his money from his tooth, that was bad. So the teacher actually wrote a note confirming that Michael lost his tooth at school. So that might go in his box, and we might lose the teeth part. But and so it's things like that where heirloom, we tend to think of things that have to be like, I have this expensive ring passed on, or I've got the equivalent of the crown jewels, but really heirlooms can be anything. And I think I like the word treasures for them, is because that little note is a treasure, the note and it tells a story. So those are the kind of things that I think, if we're using as a project to build our own treasure boxes, that this is a good way to start. And then figure out, if have you got some significant, my boys have, I believe it was either their grandfather or their great grandfather did woodwork as a hobby, and they have two of the most beautiful boxes that were made by whichever, I've got to find out who made them, that I think would be ideal to put their treasures in, instead of my photo safe polyethylene box that they're in right now. So it may just be, because we got to keep we have to keep the box too. So why not use it as it was intended? Like it's a box, the stuff in it. So that was wonderful. Thank you, Jane.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for
comments?
inviting me.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you so much. This is a classic combination of the things that we've been talking about all along in terms of the objects and photos. Photos, as I've always said, a photo is an image stored on paper. And when you digitize it, you take that image into another form. It's not better. It's just a different form with its own set of trade-offs and so on. And obviously, for preservation, it's good to have it in multiple places, but it also creates new ways to create pointers and tell stories. This was such a fabulous example because it comes together and shows how physical context of a physical box creates a new kind of context where you're interactive. It's physical world is interactive.
Who knew?
Who
Who forgot?
Yeah, who forgot? And it's a great way to kick off this series looking at these things. Later this month, I saw as Laurie Olson White introduced the idea of starting with Annie Diem's Century Safe and turning it into a project to talk about a time capsule that she's developing for her own family for the year 2076, the 300th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Wow, I was gobsmacked because, of course, it is a project and it's got so many layers inside. And it has nothing to do with, frankly, with being American. It has everything to do with all of these kinds of things about a treasure box of an object. This is just about an interactive object with a very specific layer of time and everything else on it. So I've asked her to speak to Project Kin as a Project Kin special event in April. So that will be on April 16th. To cover that as well, because I'm inspired. And Kathy, not only did you mention your ship in the bottle, but also with changing funeral practices around the world, and these are constantly changing. I was thinking, some of you may remember a post I did a while back commemorating my mom's passing, where she passed. We had her cremated, and then as a family, we had a service on a boat and rest her ashes on the bottom of the ocean. And I have the coordinates. It's a QR code. It is the coordinates of the GPS coordinates for the placement of the urn. I have the box the urn came in. That urn was specifically designed to decompose and be environmentally sound. And I've been thinking about what to do with that box. It's finding ways where you make these connections and then carrying them forward to their moment. Is this kind of a time capsule? Is it a treasure box? Each of these steps, the genius of a treasure box that you have now that has been passed down for 3 generations is just so incredible. I think we're all just doing a big hug here. That's just all we've got.
It was wonderful. As Marcy said, it was wonderful. Like getting together with friends and talking about these things.
Yeah. I don't know. I sort of feel like we need to check back in, maybe at next month's episode, to see where we are and what have we done about this. It's the Physical Object Interactive Tour. I don't know. We're going to do something with that. Again, thank you, everyone. I very much appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Yes.